the ego's goal is quite explicitly ego autonomy. From the beginning, then, its purpose is to be separate, sufficient unto itself, and independent of any power except its own. This is why it is the what? Symbol of separation. You see, it's not a thing. It's just a symbol. It's a symbol representing what? An act, a decision on your part to look and see things, look at and see things by yourself and determine what they are by yourself, instead of staying with the meaning they have because of what God is extending or expressing of Himself right there. And if you think you are the ego, then you will think that is your purpose. I cannot state it too often, that no matter what you think you are, you haven't stopped being the full representation of God, the Christ, right here and right now. And you cannot have become anything less than that, no matter how much you try to ignore it. So this ego that you may think you are is only a symbol of a decision you made. That's all. And who is this you that made the decision? I will tell you it's the Christ. Because that's the only thing there is sitting here right now listening. That's the only thing that's here right now as you are listening. Every idea has a purpose. Ideas are purpose embodied. You might say that purpose emerges. Impetus emerges. And its reason for emerging is its purpose. Every idea has a purpose, and its purpose is always the natural extension of what it is. Everything that stems from the ego is the natural outcome of its central belief. And the way to undo its results is merely to recognize that their source is not natural, being out of accord with your true nature. We once said that to will contrary to God is wishful thinking and not real willing. You see? It's just an imagination. And nothing is accomplished whenever any attempt is made to will contrary to God. Oh, but Father, I'd rather go this way. Oh, but Father, I don't want to go so fast. Oh, but Father, you see. And you dig in your heels. But you know what? You can't delay the movement, and you can't become unattached from the movement. And so all you're engaged in is insane wishful thinking. That's all, and not real willing. His will, God's will, is one, because the extension of His will cannot be unlike itself. That which is one has absolute integrity. That which is fragmented, if there could be such a thing, would be a state of disintegration. But His will is one, because the extension of his will cannot be unlike itself, and therefore isn't. And so you haven't stopped being what God is being right there where you are. You haven't become an ego. And you haven't become the thoughts and the definitions that you have made up while trying to imagine that you can make up things on your own. The real conflict you experience then is between the ego's idle wishes and the will of God, which you share. You see? So what happens when we take a look at this awful thing called the ego that's not your friend and that does not have your best interests at heart and is all these awful things that we've discussed from time to time? What happens when you take a look at it directly? You find out that it's nothing more than a bunch of idle wishes. You see? We find out that everything it engages in is nothing more than wishful thinking. Well, how scary is that? Not scary at all. And on top of it, the ego engaging in wishful thinking is not you. You are the Christ who can't stop being the Christ, being the presence of God, even if you're ignoring it. And that's part of the clarity that comes out of looking squarely at what the ego is. Everything we've been discussing since our first get-together has been uncovering this fact to you. The real conflict you experience, then, is between the ego's idle wishes and the will of God, which you share. Can this be a real conflict? Can there be conflict between something and nothing? Not really. The problem is that the nothing which you discover is nothing seems to you very clearly to be something at the moment. You think you are just an organism that has a brain in its head that is nothing more than a bunch of electrical synapses that cause an experience called consciousness, and that as this hunk of thinking meat, you have, through a process of evolution, arrived at a point of dominating your planet and on its way to expand out into the universe and embrace it, envelop it, you see. But that's not true. That's just the best definitions you've been able to come up with without experiencing a connection with your real source. Now, what I've just said, you're well familiar with because we've discussed it before. And that amounts to our looking at the illusion and looking through it and beyond it and arriving at the truth. Why? So that the truth becomes more pronounced in your awareness, making it easier for you to shift your allegiance from your old definitions, your old well-established and habitual definitions, into the truth that will lift you out of the experiences of limits that you have been inappropriately bound by. In other words, so that you might move into the freedom that is already naturally yours but which you haven't availed yourself of because you didn't know it existed. You thought you were just hunks of thinking meat. Doing your best and doing incredibly well at that. Yours, continuing, is the independence of creation, not autonomy. Now, earlier it says the ego's goal is quite explicitly ego autonomy. But yours, now that you have forgotten the act of separation, now that you have forgotten that you said, Father, I want a divorce, and as a hunk of thinking meat, your goal is the independence of creation. In other words, you're not busy denying the Father anymore. You've conveniently tucked out of sight that you are ignoring your bond with the Father, and you are engaged in enjoying being independently creative. Your goal is to create a better world. Your goal is to create a better self. Your goal is to improve the situation, whatever the situation is, thinking that you have a capacity all by yourself to accomplish this. So yours is the independence of creation, not of autonomy. And it is the goal of the autonomy is the goal of the ego. But, and I'm adding this word but, and then continuing, your whole creative function lies in your complete dependence on God, whose function He shares with you. You see, that's the fact that you can arrive at with clarity when you're willing to look at the illusion. The illusion is that you have a capacity to be independently creative. And so each one of you, to one degree or another, is always trying to find creative ways to deal with situations. Of course, without ever including the Father in it. But your whole creative function lies in your complete dependence on God, whose function He shares with you. God's function is the movement of being that is best described by the word creation. You are to be co-creators with God. You are to be present with God, not claiming any separation, not claiming any independence from being the conscious experience of that movement, so that you might experience the movement and recognize God in it and confirm God to God by performing the function God has placed in you to glorify Him. By recognizing Him in creation and recognizing your part in that movement of creation, knowing as a result of the experience that you're inseparable from it. By His, God's, willingness to share it, He became as dependent on you as you are on Him. Now, it isn't that God created you and then gave you a purpose to fulfill that fulfilled Him. It's just the way it has worked forever. because you and God are inseparable and have always engaged in being the movement and recognition of creation. But this helps. Using these words helps you to grasp that you have a function beyond making up your own creative solutions to the dilemma of being that you're faced with as a result of your having said, "But Father, I'd rather do it my way." Again, by His willingness to share it, He became as dependent on you as you are on Him. Do not ascribe the ego's arrogance to Him who wills not to be independent of you. He has included you in His autonomy. God is autonomous, yes. There is nothing He must refer back to. There is nothing He must cooperate with. He is infinite and all-inclusive. Being is infinite and all-inclusive. Life is infinite and all-inclusive. A singularity. There is nothing outside of it for it to defer to or refer to, or get permission from. Can you believe that autonomy is meaningful apart from Him? When you look at it this way, you can't. Autonomy apart from Him would mean being something not all-inclusive. It would mean creation was divided up into parts, little autonomous parts. But autonomy is something that can only be, is something that can only exist in a singularity that is boundaryless. And so if you want to experience true autonomy, you must say, "Father, I would like to join with you and fulfill my function of recognizing you in everything and experiencing the joy of seeing only what you are and its perfection instead of the awfulness that I've been excitedly trying to cope with as a result of my looking at everything on my own." The belief in ego autonomy is costing you the knowledge of your dependence on God, what? In which your freedom lies. The ego sees all dependency as threatening and has twisted even your longing for God into a means of establishing itself. But do not be deceived by its interpretation of your conflict. Where do you think the energy and the desire comes from to improve yourself and to improve your world and to come up with a better mousetrap and to become a bigger success, and on and on and on? It comes from an inherent knowing of your singularity, your infinite wholeness, from which nothing is excluded, and everything is included, and your wholeness is infinitely bountiful, if I may put it that way. And that knowing, which you can't get rid of, even if you have denied its source, it remains with you, and you seek for it at your own hand. but you seek it in the name of the ego's goal, which is to assert, to establish, and to succeed at being absolutely independent and actual. Now, if you try to consider everything that I have said in some objective, intellectual manner, you will miss the point. Because the actuality of what I've been saying and what the Course says comes into play in the way you all relate to each other. There are only two voices, the voice for love and the voice for fear. Or you could say the voice for truth and the voice for fear. The voice for truth has as its motivation, extension, caring. The voice for fear is always to achieve self-protection, defense. One is self-oriented, the other is other-oriented. And you want to know something? The quickest way to uncover your ingrained habits of self-protection that you might not be aware that you're employing is to dare to let yourself become conscious of others' needs as well as your own. I know needs are messy. I've discussed them before. To get into dealing with needs is not clean and simple. But love, compassion, enriched affections in you find natural extension into addressing needs. Not wants. I've said it before, and I'm saying it again tonight. You need to value needs more than you do. And you need to give needs your attention more than you do. And you need to be willing to address needs rather than addressing an intellectual concept that says, well, your needs aren't actual. Your needs are imagined. Your needs are the result of your ignorance, and they're not real. You have an adorable little baby with snot running down its lip. What do? You get a Kleenex and you wipe his nose. And while you're doing it, you coo with him and play with him and make him be at peace. Comfort him. You don't say, well, you're not really a body, you know. And if you did know that you were a body, snot wouldn't be running down your lip. Now get with it. Nor would you say to someone whose house has just been blown away in a hurricane, well, you know, there really isn't any such thing as loss. It's just a concept you have that you possessed something in the first place when you never possessed it at all. No. you first of all say, are you warm? Are you hungry? Are you thirsty? Are you dry? Do you have a place to rest? Do you have shelter of some sort? You pay attention to the needs in the moment, and you just love them enough to address the need. You don't say, well, someday when you're awake, you're going to look back at this and laugh. And they're sitting there on the curb where their house used to be with a little rag doll that belonged to their child who they don't know where she is at the moment. You just don't do this. Love addresses and meets needs. And God is expressed, is extended in the acts of love that meet needs. And just like the child whose diapers you would change because they're wet, you help the adult whose house is gone to get dry, to feel comfort, to feel safety. You meet the needs. Because in meeting the needs, the meaning of God with us is extended. And when that is extended, healing occurs. And grief is assuaged. And miracles happen. Well, the South is just generally speaking corrupt. It's no surprise that it was wiped out by a hurricane so that things could be addressed that needed to be addressed. That is such a hateful thought. It says that the ego is real. It says that the ego's perception of life is actual. And that it constitutes a sound basis for hateful judgment to be practiced. It says that suffering is deserved. Now you tell me where freedom lies in that.